Hmm. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it's time for Friday Reads on September 20th. I didn't do one last week because we were out of town, so this is sort of a double wide load. Although I did not make a video, I did read up a storm, so I have several books to talk about today. And these books, I shouldn't pick this up again because I already rejacked my back a little bit just making a thumbnail with them, but there's so many tabs in these books, it's ridiculous. But I'm not going to talk about most of that stuff because there's so many and the video will go on forever. My back is better but extremely tricky, and we're still having the house of back pain here because Steven, like, his was getting better, mine got worse, then mine got better and his got worse, so we're just kind of a hot mess here. So in TV news, two shows that we like have started their fourth seasons that we are watching, Slow Horses and Only Murders in the Building, and they both have started out really well in season 4, so we are enjoying that. Let's move on to the books because there's quite a few. So the first book I read in this 2-week stretch was Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters by J.D. Salinger, and I may have started that the last time I was doing a Friday Reads. And this book, it's paired with Seymour in Introduction, so it's 2 novellas. It's something that I had read many times, but I hadn't read it in many years. So it was in a frequent reread mode back in my teens and early 20s, and then somehow I hadn't read it for a really long time, and I thoroughly enjoyed this reread. If you're familiar with the Salinger body of work, there's a fictional family, the Glass family, that has all these children, and a lot of his short fiction and novellas are about different members of the Glass family. So in this particular story, Buddy Glass, this takes place, I think it's 1942. Buddy Glass is a young soldier who's on a medical leave, and he goes to attend the wedding of his brother Seymour, who is the oldest one in the family. And we find out right from the very beginning that Seymour, that he's writing this from several years later, and Seymour is no longer alive. And that's chronicled in another story. And I don't want to go too much into it and do accidental spoilers, but uh, he's supposed to be going to this wedding. He's been commissioned to be the family representative at this wedding because everybody else is overseas, stationed somewhere. The war is on, or the younger ones are still children, and so he is sent to attend this wedding. But Seymour doesn't show. And so most of this story takes place in 2 locations, in a crowded car and then at an apartment. And so Buddy finds himself in this car full of people who are angry and disgruntled because Seymour has pulled a no-show at the altar. And he's trying to blend into the car and not give himself away as being the brother of the offender here. And the descriptions of the people in the car and the conversations, the 1940s New York City ride in this car. There's a man that's one of the most wonderful descriptions in all of literature, this little teeny tiny old man with a top hat, and he's so tiny that his feet are swinging on the car seat, and he's the only happy person in the car. I've always loved this person. And then he reluctantly has to give up who he is and invite everyone into his apartment. And so, and it's a hot, sweltering June afternoon in New York City, and it's funny, and it does give a brief rundown of the members of the Glass family, and forever makes me frustrated that they don't all have full stories and novellas about each of them because they all sound interesting to me. So that was part of Shorty September. The next book was a buddy read that I did with Melinda from A Web of Stories, and we read Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. Each of us had read Night of the Living Res. That is one of my favorite short story collections. Melinda likes that collection, but she didn't love it as much as I do. And so in the overall consensus, I ended up, after reading the short stories and the novel, I thought that the short stories was a stronger book, and she went with the novel, but we both liked both of them. And it is very propulsive reading. This was one of the fastest buddy reads because once you start, it was kind of hard to stop. I think, well, I'm going to just do a couple of chapters and then I'm going to go on Voxer and put down my thoughts. And like, whoops, I read 3 or 4. And then I'd go to look and she was like up ahead and she'd done the next 3 or 4. So we had a hard time slowing down, but we both found this to be a really well written and just it's a deeply sad story. So we have a middle-aged man named Charles, who is a white man who lives just across the dividing line of the Penobscot Reservation in Maine. And there's just kind of a part of a river dividing him from the official reservation. And he cannot live on that reservation, even though he grew up there. His mother was white and had him through a previous relationship, and then she married Frederick, who was a enrolled member of the Penobscot Nation. And so when Charles became 18, he could no longer live there legally. And there's this whole thing about the quantum rules and who can live on the reservation. When he was a young man, his girlfriend Mary got pregnant, and she decided that she did not want to have a child that would not be able to live on the reservation. So she concealed the identity that Charles was a father. This is all right at the very beginning. And she has lived with another man named Roger, and they've raised this child. This has been a lifelong regret of Charles, that he can see from his porch and across the water, he can see Mary's house, and he can watch his daughter from afar. And he's decided at this point in life, when his daughter is now in her 20s, that he wants to tell her. And so this story is about regrets, decisions, the passage of time. And Charles is also a recovering alcoholic, and he has his best friend that he met in AA, still drinks a lot, even though he goes to the meetings, and that's a unusual side character in the story. So in the course of the story, he's concerned about the daughter, who he thinks might be having some problems, and he's also quite wrapped up in problems with his mother. They were estranged for a number of years, and now they have reestablished their relationship, but his mother is slipping into dementia, and she's always had depression, and he's trying to help her and care for her as well, and he's trapped in the middle. And these parts of the book about dementia, really, they were rough reading for me because they were really, really accurate. Morgan Talty must have family members who are experiencing dementia, and he must have had firsthand knowledge of this, because it is, a lot of times it's not portrayed that accurately. Now that I have been kind of steeped in it for a few years with my mother-in-law and my own mother, then when I see it portrayed in books and movies, a lot of times I think that's not really how it is. But in this book, it is very, very accurate, and it's heartbreaking for both of them, and it's really sad, but it's really good. Next in my reading adventures, and what I really like about this 2-week spread is that there's quite a range. Sometimes you get stuck accidentally in a thematic rut or a topic rut, and you think, I didn't really mean to read all these books like this in a row, but that didn't happen. So now we went to I don't know if I could say I guess it's lighter. It is lighter. It's not that it's not like it's a lark or it's fluffy, but I guess it is a little lighter. That was Loot by Tania James. This is a historical fiction novel that takes place beginning in the very end of the 18th century. We are in India, in the palace of Tipu Sultan, who ruled for quite a number of years until I think it was 1799. The downfall is chronicled in this book. But he's a connoisseur of European goods, artistry, technology, and he has gathered in his court various French and British artisans and engineers and different people to create things. And so he has this French clockmaker who is learning how to make automatons. And the clockmaker takes on this boy who has been noted for his carving skills, this Indian boy named Abbas, who lives in the nearby town. And Abbas is a talented artist, wood carver, and like I said, he becomes apprenticed to the French clockmaker, and they make this tiger. And the tiger is real. It's a real thing in history. I'll put a little picture up in here, and I'll put a link in the description box. But they make this gigantic, it's really big. It's like the size of a person, and it's a tiger crouching on a man like he's eating him or attacking him. And when you play an organ that's in the side of the tiger, it it moves, and the man lets out moans and groans. And so this was the commission piece, and they were going to go on and learn how to make all these other things, but the kingdom falls. So adventure ensues. Abbas ends up traveling to many other places. The life and path of the tiger is part of the story as well. And something that I really enjoyed in this book, there was a shifting of points of view. It's third person, but it shifts around from Abbas to the clockmaker to a young woman that he knows who travels to France. Who else? Oh, there's a valet to this British lady who collects Asian artifacts, and it just moves around, and everybody has a really interesting point of view, and that illuminates and highlights their character and adds extra dimension. And so it's kind of an adventure, but there is a decent amount of character development. She fictionalized these particular characters. Nobody knows who actually made the tiger, but the tiger still exists and it still works. But I enjoyed this a lot. And I've had that book sitting around since Christmas. I finally read it. All right, another book that I finished that I was working on previously was Old in Art School by Nell Painter. And both of these I read for the event Framed in September, books about art. So this was both for Framed and also my nonfiction book of the month. And this is about Nell Painter, who retired from a very successful career as just a historian, a professor of history at Princeton University in her 60s, and went back to school in the field of art. She was discouraged from this as a young woman in college, but it's something she always wanted to get back to and explore. So first she has to do some undergraduate work so that she can build a portfolio and apply to graduate school. And then she goes to Rhode Island School of Design. It's really an interesting book because some of the things that she experiences are very specific and personal about herself. And then some are more widespread issues, problems, presumptions and attitudes about the art world and academia. And so she finds herself, when she goes to the undergraduate classes, it's a pretty diverse group. So really just the fact that she's older is the only thing that really sets her apart. But when she goes to RISD, she finds herself, she's the only person in the cohort. Well, first there's two people that are not white, but one of them doesn't stay with the program. So then it's just her. She's the oldest one by far. There's men and women, but it's really just the fact that she's older and a person of color really sets her apart. And also it's a very, it wasn't her first choice of schools, and the way she describes it, it's maybe not the greatest match for her, but nevertheless she persists, and she gets a lot out of it. She chronicles these ups and downs. She has all kinds of moments of self-discovery and artistic breakthroughs, and other times where she's just discouraged by the system that seems to gravitate to the youngest, shiniest, trendiest person. And her background as an academic and a historian is completely discounted by this group of people. She feels like her cred in life should count for something, and a lot of it does infuse the work that she wants to do as an artist, and it's just not valued in this other setting, and that's a constant frustration for her. The artists that she's interested in, the social and historical aspects of African American history, and it's just not like the thing of the moment in the group that she's in. And so she's told that her use of text in a painting is old fashioned. Her style, her subject matter is just, not the hot new thing. There's a guy, there's just the funniest part. There's a guy who spends all his years of school painting and repainting this picture of a leg in stockings from an old ad. And everybody just enthuses and raves about his work. And she's thinking, okay, fine. But for 3 years, repainting this leg in a stocking. And so things like that. In the middle of all of it, she has to deal with constant concerns and interruptions and emergencies from her elderly parents that are in their 90s who are declining. And so she has that kind of pressure weighing on her as well. I thought she was a really interesting person. And she has I wondered how the other people in the program would have described her, because she has a strong personality. And I would be interested to read one of her history books, and see how I like her writing from that point of view, from that, in that topic area that she's done most of her work in. So anyway, it was a good read. It was just perfect for this event. I had to get up and stretch. I need to change my channel name to Old on Booktube. All right, the next one was a total delight, and that was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. Now, I really don't know if I'll read anything else by this author, because the descriptions of everything else I've heard about her does not sound like it's up my alley, but this one really was. This was great. It's quite short. It was for Shorty September. It's 172 pages if you include the afterword. This is about a woman named Keiko who's in her mid-30s, and she works at a convenience store. The first thing I had to do when reading this book was disband my notion of a convenience store American style, because this is kind of different. It's not drastically different, but it is different. So when I think of a convenience store, I think of 7-Eleven or a little bodega, but this is a little more comprehensive. I think the name convenience doesn't really mean small, but it means convenient. So they have daily specials. It seems like they have more, maybe, I don't know if it's fresh food, but food you would eat for a meal, not just quick snacks and cigarettes like a convenience store that I'm thinking of. Keiko is an unusual person. When she was 18, she took the job at this particular store, and she's been there ever since. She went through college. Her family expected her to go out and seek a professional full-time job, and she never did, because she is content and at home and happy and fulfilled at the convenience store. She buys into all of the stuff that other people chafe at, like the daily affirmations and the daily goals and the script that you're supposed to follow when dealing with customers. Other people at the store they either think that she's weird and just way too hardcore about working in the store, or the managers just love her because she's always available, she's always enthusiastic, she's super organized, she knows the store like the back of her hand. She's just, as far as being an employee, she's absolutely awesome. And she's happy and content in this role. Now, nobody else is content with her in her life, because she does not want more. She's not interested in having a partner. She doesn't want to get married. She's not interested in children. She's not interested in working in another job. She has her apartment. And the fact that she is a self-sufficient adult person who is content is just not enough for her friends and family. And there's a lot in here in this book where Keiko realizes that the way she lives is not what other people choose, and she makes some attempts to kind of smooth that over. Her sister gives her some stock phrases that she can say to cover up why she's not dating. She looks at the styles of other women in her age group and attempts to replicate the same kind of clothing styles, and she consciously mimics speech patterns of people at work. But what's interesting is that while she does this on purpose, she notices that everyone else does it too, only subconsciously. She meets with old friends, she and her sister, she sees how they also change in their speech patterns and their styles based on what's going on in their life and who they spend time with, but they don't know that they're doing it. She does it on purpose. So I thought that was very interesting. This is an unconventional person, but she's completely unbothered by this. It's everyone else that has a problem with it. The fact that she is just a content person, not seeking all the things that other people think you need to be happy, is a persistent irritant to those other people. And so at one point in the story, and I don't want to give too much away, but Keiko tries something different. And the effects of this experiment are fascinating to her and to us. I want to say more about that, or about this other character that comes into the narrative. And some of the funniest scenes in the book, though, come out of this part. Also some scenes that made me concerned, but I will just say I do love how this book ends. Now, you thought that you heard about some good stuff, but I haven't even gotten to the best book of the whole 2 weeks. The bounty of goodness is just so, I just can't even. But the very best one of all, this is the runner-up, but the best one was The History of Sound by Ben Shattuck. I have not read anything previously. He only has one other book previously, and it's a nonfiction book, but I'm tempted to take a look at it, even though it doesn't sound like anything I'd be interested in. But just based on how much I love this book, I at least want to check it out. The History of Sound is a short story collection, and it is set, well, a lot of it is set in Maine, New Hampshire, Nantucket. I think we're even in Newfoundland at one point. But and the time period ranges from the 1600s to the current time. The stories are in a pattern that is described at the beginning of the book, Hook and Chain, a song or poem popularized in 18th century New England in which the first and last lines rhyme and contain rhyming couplets within, as in A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F, A. The second half of the couplet often completes the sentence or sentiment of the first. This is the pattern of the book. There are 12 stories beginning with A and ending with A, and then the stories in the middle are paired. In what way are they paired? Well, there's some element in the first story that when you read the next story, something comes around, something that illuminates, they illuminate one another, they edify one another, or sometimes we see something that we understand as a misunderstanding between the two halves or the people, and they're often in two very different time periods. It might be an artifact that appears in one and is discovered in another. Sometimes the first story is the more present day, and then we go into the past. The whole thing begins with a man who is in his 80s. His name's Lionel, and he was a singer and a historian of music, and he reflects upon the summer that he spent with another musician that he met, who was a composer, and their love affair and their adventure traveling on foot across New England and recording folk music, basically, kind of an oral history project. And in this initial story, he tells about that long ago relationship and what happened, and he receives an unexpected package. So this first story, this is the one you start reading it, and I started reading it, and I'm just instantly, I thought, it's really good. The good story tingles set in. The first story was just absolutely beautiful, kind of devastating, and I thought, what am I in for? Because this first one is just slaying me to death. And then I just loved the whole thing. the pairings, the things that related and came back around, and the connections. It was just so beautifully crafted, and each story was separate and fascinating. The time shifts were very easy to follow. The times and the years were identified clearly in the stories, in a natural way in the body of the text, so that you weren't scrambling around and trying to figure out where you were. So many, and there was a lot of recurring themes about people uh, leaving, departing, running away. That came up a lot. People at turning points in their lives. There's some format changes. A lot of them are just straight up stories, but there's a few different formats. One is in the form of a podcast. One is a journal. One is the introduction to a book. So that was interesting. I was reminded once in a while of Northwoods, partly because of the setting, partly because of the changes throughout the book. Although that book goes in a linear way up through time, and this one folds back and circles around. And there was even an apple orchard part in the book too. So I did feel a few echoes of that, but also it's very distinctive and different. As soon as I finished, I wanted to start over, and I did go back. I had to read the first story again because of that pattern that I described. And it is just some beautiful writing. I'm thinking, wait a minute, who is this guy and where did he come from? And I love this book, and I hope it shows up in a bunch of award lists. So that brings me to what I am currently reading, and that is the very distinctive Mammoth by Ava Baltasar, translated by Julia Sanches. I just began it last night, but it is in her, she has such a unique style, and the characters, her main characters, are always somebody. I mean, it's only the second book I read, but I knew going in that the character was going to be somebody I have not encountered before, and that maybe I wouldn't understand her fully, but I would find her fascinating, and that's already happening. So we have this really young woman. She's just turning 24, and what she wants is to have a child. She doesn't want a partner. She's a lesbian. She doesn't really want I don't think she wants any partner, but she really doesn't want a man. And she has a party at the beginning with the intention of getting pregnant. And I'm going to read just this one sentence this sentence, I just had to stop and laugh because this was her description of sex. And it's not graphic, don't worry, but she meets a guy at the party, and she's trying to get pregnant, but she wasn't really interested in this guy for any other reason. So this is her description. It was a tedious, drawn out, and turbulent event, like a stagecoach ride or a seizure. If that doesn't sell the book and make you want to read what else is going to happen and how is she going to describe it, I cannot help you further, but I've only begun. I'm already into it. And then I'm also reading from, in addition to my short stories for the short stories of the day, I am reading stories from this book, Future Tense Fiction. A couple of them are in my 30 stories, and they're all online. So if you look up Future Tense Fiction from Slate magazine, though I think the whole thing is online, but I got this at the Recycle Books in Denton a few months ago. So I'm just kind of dipping in and out and enjoying the stories in this book. I don't know what else I'm going to pick up. I have several novels. Some of them fit into this month's themes, and some of them are just whispering my name. So I don't know what else I'm going to pick up, because this one, I think this isn't going to take up too much time, and then I'll be ready to move on. So what have you been reading? What's really good? What are you excited about? What are you going to read this weekend? Let me know in the comments. Look forward to hearing from you, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.